What's up, everybody? Welcome to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate you being here. Would also appreciate it if you would like the video, maybe leave a comment or two, perhaps even subscribe. So for this week's video, I asked for suggestions and thank all of you who chimed in on Twitter. One topic that stood out above the rest was solitary confinement. So that's what I'm going to go with this week. Solitary confinement is obviously a hot topic in corrections, though it's not one that I have a lot of experience with, which is fine, of course, because any reentry topic or criminal justice topic generally is not so much about personal knowledge as it is what the research and the studies show. So what solitary confinement looks like varies from place to place, but generally speaking, it's 23 hours a day or more in a small cell, nearly empty, few belongings, and very limited human contact. General bad behavior, being deemed a threat to others can get you in solitary, as well as being deemed dangerous to yourself, being labeled a snitch, for instance, or otherwise being labeled a desirable target for other inmates. All these can land you in some form of solitary. We generally hear about solitary confinement in discussions regarding its cruelty and whether it should be abolished. Not often do we hear it tied in with reentry, but I believe the two are absolutely related because of the short-term and long-term consequences that I believe play a significant factor in one's reentry and rehabilitation. So first I want to look at how the practice of solitary confinement meshes with four of the purported goals of corrections. Number one, retribution or just desserts, which is nothing more than get back, making someone pay for some harm that they caused. Number two, deterrence, which is keeping an individual or others from behaving a certain way through fear of punishment. And three, incapacitation, which is intended to render someone incapable of committing crime by removing him or her from a location, such as society, where they commit the said crime. I'll get to number four in a minute, but let's look at the first three. And can solitary confinement help with these? Regarding retribution, since solitary confinement is often used as a punishment, yes. It's like, you do this behavior, assault an inmate, possess contraband, etc., then you go to the hole. So yeah, there's a punishment there. Hey guys, sorry for the wardrobe change and the lighting change. Realized last night after recording this that I had managed somehow to lose a big chunk of my footage, so re-recording now. So yeah, deterrence. Does deterrence work? Can solitary confinement deter individuals from whatever it is that officials don't want them doing, right? Whatever behaviors they are allegedly exhibiting. And yeah, so it's unclear. Part of it may depend on, I think, what your definition of work is. Clearly, deterrence does not work in every case. If it did, nobody would go to solitary confinement more than once, and there would be a chunk of the population who never went because they would be deterred by seeing the individuals go to solitary confinement, and they would say, you know what, I don't want any parts of it. I'm not going to exhibit this behavior that might get me sent there. So both of those populations, the individuals who went to solitary confinement and the individuals who witnessed other people go to solitary confinement, would be scared straight, so to speak, which again we know is not a viable method of anything. Does solitary confinement serve to incapacitate? Sure, at least to some degree, right? You have somebody in a segregation cell, then they're very limited in the offending they can do. They can flood a cell, possibly assault staff, though it's going to be harder given the limited interaction between them. They could do some self-harm. But their opportunities to offend are going to be greatly limited, especially as compared to the opportunities that they would have in general population where there's more human interaction, more freedoms, things of that nature. But the big one here, from my perspective at least, and probably from most of your perspectives, is rehabilitation. Why is that? Well, because prisons are supposed to rehabilitate in addition to punish, incapacitate, and deter. But can solitary confinement really help, correct negative behaviors? And I think, personally, I don't see the evidence that it does. I don't see the studies showing that people who go into solitary confinement, whether it be for a day, for a month, for a year, that they come out any better than they went in. In fact, there are studies suggesting that it's the complete opposite. And I think the reason for that's pretty simple. Segregating somebody in a pretty bad environment doesn't do anything to target the risk factors that created the negative behavior in the first place. For something to have rehabilitative value, it can't be overly punitive. It has to be therapeutic. It has to rely not on pain and misery to fix the problem, but we have to restructure the way that we think. It's the same concept as these boot camps and these scared straight programs that simply don't work. And for a practice that is considered cruel and unusual by many, from a rehabilitative correctional standpoint, it just doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make sense that in 2022, with all the research that we have available, that we still believe that we can correct this aggressive, impulsive behavior by using methods that likely aggravate the behavior and further develop the behavior. We're social creatures, and these forms of isolation can induce anxiety, stress, depression, and possibly make changes in the brain that can negatively affect these behaviors, our cognitive and our emotional behavior, which obviously is not what we want to do. It's the opposite, in fact. Sensory deprivation and lack of human validation are not the positive reinforcements that researchers talk about when they say that correctional programming should be 4 parts positive reinforcement to 1 part punishment at a minimum. So I read a study the other day saying that if we remove mentally ill inmates, and we all know that a large prison population suffers from mental illness, that if we remove mentally ill inmates from segregation and treat them, that we can reduce violence. Explosion. No shit, right? So you're telling me that you take a suffering person, you remove them from an insufferable environment, and you treat them for what they are suffering for, and then they may get better. I'm sorry, suffering from. Then they may get better. And let's say that there are people who need to be kept apart from others, even if for a limited time. I think we have to ask ourselves whether we're doing it the right way. I think a lot of us probably agree that we're not. And if we're not doing it right, then that doesn't bode well for not only the individual, but for society, because as we know, statistically speaking, 97%, maybe 99 of people behind walls and fences now are going to be free one day. They're going to be right back in our communities. And do we want them back worse than they went in, right? I think that's the ultimate question, not only with segregation, solitary confinement, but just reentry and rehabilitation, generally speaking. That's it for this video. Please leave me some comments, leave some questions. What do you think? Are we doing solitary right? If not, what can we do better?